Fantastic. Well, thanks for joining us today. As you mentioned, my name is Megan Metzger. I am the CEO of Decode. And just quick background on Decode, we are an organization that connects emerging tech and the government market in order to really drive commercial innovation into the government. And data science and human capital is something that is very near and dear to our hearts. We run accelerator programs for technology companies looking to understand how to be successful in this market. We run training programs for the government to understand how to evolve culture, navigate their own bureaucracy, and accelerate the adoption of technology. And of course, we run programs for partners such as Deloitte, who want to work very closely with those organizations. But enough about me. Let's bring on our fantastic lineup for today's panel. First, I would like to introduce to you Major Vito Errico. He's from Army Futures Command. So Eric, come on in. All right, Eric, why don't you give us a 2-second introduction on yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Vito Errico. I am an Army officer assigned to Futures Command here in Austin, Texas. And I am a special advisor to the Commanding General, General Mike Murray, on all matters relating to private industry, technology, and policy. So it's a pleasure to be here today. Thanks, Megan.
Fantastic. Looking forward to the conversation. All right, next, let's bring on Colonel Matt Benini, one of the chief data scientists. All right, welcome, Matt. And why don't you give us a quick introduction on yourself as well?
Sure thing. So I'm the chief data scientist for JSOC's global analytics platform. So we're charged with making our command's data accessible, useful, and insightful. We do that along 3 customer-facing product lines: intelligence-focused applications, operations-focused applications, and then analytics. So the directorate that leads that analytics is called Scope. I'm the director of that as well.
All right, fantastic. And next, let's have Colonel Michael Artelli join us.
Hello, thank you. I didn't get the announcement of the COVID civilian clothes for the military, sorry. I am the Air Force Chief Analyst and, more importantly, the Career Field Manager for the Ops Research and Data Scientists in the Air Force. So I am in charge of the analysts in the Air Force, making sure that we have the talent for them, the training for them, and the opportunities. We just created the career field of the 15 Alpha for the Air Force, and I'll be talking about that today.
All right, I can't wait to hear more about that. And last but definitely not least, let's bring in Jim Robesco.
Hi, thanks. I'm Jim Robesco, the CEO and one of the co-founders of StriveWorks. We're a data science company based here in Austin, Texas, and we're focused on the delivery of operational analytic applications to our partners in the defense and intelligence communities. And we do this kind of through a joint platform and people business model.
All right, well, we've got a lot of ground to cover today, but maybe just to start, I'd love to first just lay that foundation and really talk about what do you mean when we are talking about operational data science? And Jim, I'll start with you to kind of provide us with that definition that we can jump off from.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you caught Frank Strickland doing the intro to this whole track, I think he actually laid it out very well. But I'll kind of rehash that if you didn't catch that. I mean, fundamentally, what we're interested in here is solving problems that matter. As Matt said in his intro, you know, our focus is that ultimately we're trying to make data useful to the consumers of that data. This implies that this is a very kind of customer or problem-centric focus rather than methods. So in the kind of organizational entities that you see doing operational data science, you're going to see people kind of self-organized by mission area rather than by functional area. I serve customer XYZ rather than I am a computer vision expert. In addition to that kind of core function of data science, I think operational data science really mandates 2 additional things. The first is that mission or domain knowledge, and the second is the ability to develop and deploy. Since ultimately the kind of the scoreboard in operational data science is less focused, I should say, on am I presenting a paper at ICML? If you're here in this panel, you're missing ICML. It's going on right now, so presumably you made a choice there. And you're a little bit more focused on, is this an application in use by a customer today when I deliver it? So it's end state focused, and ultimately there's that demand for people from all 3 kind of domain areas, the mathematical, the software developer, and the mission or domain focus to kind of move to the middle. And that's what operational data science is to me.
Yeah, that's great. I really love the mission-oriented aspect of that. And I'll kick the next question over maybe to Vito there, but why is this so important to have that operational mindset when it comes to data science and what we can do with it inside the DoD?
Oh, thanks, Megan. I actually think it's important for probably any bureaucracy, really, whether that be a public institution or a private company, because so often as some of those entities get larger and larger, there's this natural inclination to place a value on procedure over results. And by operationalizing data science in the way that Jim and Matt have just sort of insinuated, it helps make sure that we don't get too involved in the science of it, and we make sure that we're actually doing it in a way that benefits end users. Now, obviously, for our purposes here at Futures Command, our end users are soldiers, and for the panelists, largely it's about service members. And so that helps us sort of everybody in large organizations sort of stay on the same page with regard to what we're actually trying to accomplish.
Yeah, you said procedure versus results, and maybe that's something we can pick at, because we know in the DoD and in the structures that we have, that's what we're really good at, procedures and following procedures. And so since this is a topic of human capital, what do we need to do to start focusing on the results instead of what we're really good at, which is focusing on the procedures? And maybe we'll start with Michael.
Wow, so thank you. The results, it's very important to make sure that we have the proper force trained. It's also very important that they are working with at the proper level, so that they're working with those decision makers directly, understanding what their problems are, so that they can actually truly answer what the next step is. When it comes to the training side, we as an Air Force have changed a lot recently. As many of you have probably seen, there's now a new data science program that's being offered by the Air Force Academy. And that's going to start getting from the very nascent, bringing in second lieutenants, that they're going to be aware of what those tools are and what the focus needs to be. Air Force Institute of Technology also offers data analytics certificates and data science certificates, and we're working on a master's and PhD for them as well, which is great. And the benefit from our career field is they will go immediately to AFIT to get a master's degree when they enter. So they are always ahead of the technology point and actually have a good mindset of what they do as a person in uniform to directly hit those decision makers.
Sure, and maybe we can even back up a little bit, because there's a lot to unpack when it comes to the human capital side of this. But you mentioned the technology. So, at the very core of it, obviously, technology itself is not innovative. It's what we do with it that will lead to innovative results. But if we don't have the tech, we also can't move forward. So, I know there's data science platforms out there like a Data Robot or a Domino Data Lab, which have actually gone through the Decode Accelerator. Where do you think we start? Do we start with the tech and build talent around the tech? Or do we start with the talent and then find the right tech? And let's see, who am I going to pick on now? Maybe we'll go over to Matt.
I would say you start with the talent, and then it makes utilization of the tech much more feasible. So I think I've observed a bias in our formations to talk about operational data science like it's something we can go procure. So, if we have the right person or the right tool, poof, we'll have AI and ML. And we think that's patently false. So in the special operations community, we've really attacked this more like a readiness problem or a training problem. So we think data exploitation is a critical capability that's relevant on today's battlefield and the battlefield to come. And our formations need to learn how to employ a new type of technical expertise to make that a capability in the battlefield. So we use 4 premises to kind of get ourselves out of aspirational PowerPoint and into making mistakes in public. So first, data science is an inherently interdisciplinary endeavor. I know Frank spoke to that in the introduction. But how that applies within our military formations is I've been fortunate enough to work for and around some very forward-thinking 04, 05 intelligence professionals that helped force technologists alongside our best analysts. Second, mastery requires both repetition and progression. So every time we put a product in front of an analyst and get feedback, we call that a repetition. And over time, what we've seen is our organization is growing its technical competence and our ability to employ more rigorous methods to inform ops. Then next, talent generates tempo, but tempo also attracts talent. So if we put data talent next to real analysts with real problems and real deadlines, then results just happen. However, the quicker we can get that cycle of product and feedback working, that's when we really start to grow, and it actually attracts top-level talent. And then finally, we relentlessly fight friction. So obviously you need access to mission and talent for operational data science, but then technologically access to usable data, open source tools, and tradecraft. So that's where I think the startup community can really help us, how we can do those things to get the iterative cycle moving faster so we learn as an organization. I think as we get more proficient, our ability to be on the receiving end of the procurement pipeline actually goes up.
So Jim, I want to get your perspective on what he just talked about. I mean, obviously you're working closely and your day-to-day life is working with data science tools and great technologies. How do you view the tech stack that we have versus the talent, and kind of some commentary on what was just discussed?
Yeah, so I think Matt put it, very, very well, right? The problem set is there, and frankly, I also think actually in a lot of ways the tech stack is there. The Air Force is, I think, probably of all the branches of service out in front in terms of making kind of best-in-class commercial tooling available to a wide range of users. Obviously, the JAIC has taken it as part of their mission set through the JCF to democratize the ability of people within the DoD enterprise to kind of hack and develop tools. And that ultimately is, I think, going to bring the repetition against problem sets, right? So, again, as an applied art, the most critical thing that we can do in operational data science is put real technologists with real tools next to real problems. If those three things are in proximity, you're going to get something valuable out of it. Sitting in a lab, sitting back somewhere else and kind of coming up with a solution and then going and search for a problem is a recipe for failure. And I don't think that's a very controversial opinion, but kind of when the rubber hits the road, that's when you kind of start to see people slip a little bit and be like, well, maybe it'd be a little easier if we could do it this way and not that way. And that's the kind of internal discipline that we need to maintain to really kind of repeat and deliver value consistently.
Yeah, when I listen to everyone speaking here, it makes me think a lot about leadership. And so we've had, I would say we've trained close to 400 DoD leaders on adopting emerging technologies, but really also transforming culture. And the thing that we constantly hear from the leaders at the top is, they came up in an organization where tech wasn't changing so rapidly, and now they're running these highly technical programs. What does our leadership need to do so they know what questions to ask and how to lead these more data-driven organizations? And Vito, I'll kick that over to you.
No, thanks, Megan, for that question. That's absolutely near and dear to General Murray's heart at Futures Command. It's a lot of the reason why Futures Command was created in the first place. I think let's break that down. There's a lot of different pieces of advice I would give to senior leaders as they lead increasingly technical formations. The first thing is open-mindedness, because as you just opened with that premise, some of them came up in circumstances where it wasn't a very technical sort of upbringing, and they just need to be open-minded about the fact that the world is a little bit different and technology is quite different, and they need to emphasize the ubiquity of the technology across the formation. It's not just the fact that these are the data nerds in one corner and you leave them over there and they'll find a way to help you if you call their help desk. It needs to permeate the entire organization, which brings us to the second point, which is it's about culture change. I mean, during the course of some of our research over the last year, you just run into to notable tech company after notable tech company that will tell you that even for them, it is about culture change, let alone DoD or the rest of the federal government. I think, federal or DoD senior leaders should leverage the fact that they're not beholden to quarterly shareholders. They can take a little bit more risk with some of their investments, and it buys them a little bit more runway than some entrepreneurs or some publicly traded companies. And then finally, I think, we'd be remiss to say that from the DoD perspective, if you do this without close partnership with academia and industry, you're probably going to do it wrong. There definitely needs to be that cross-fertilization of ideals. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, I think that's great. And Matt, as a chief data scientist, you're experiencing firsthand how to integrate with more mission-oriented folks. What has worked to help integrate these functions together, like Vito talked about, and what has not worked well? What can we learn from?
So I think what has consistently worked is so I'm an Army FA-49 Operations Research Officer. So we've used FA-49s alongside some of Jim's talent, which is industry scale data scientist, and then we bring in an intelligence expert. So they are forced to work together. And what we find is that the technical military talent can work the interface between the customer and the team and can kind of translate between the two disciplines. So we've seen that combination, which is why we call this inherently an interdisciplinary endeavor. What I've seen not work is when you don't have that buy-in from your customer's leadership. So if they think you can just contract out a couple of experts and the problem's going to solve itself, that's really a naive approach. It's an organizational commitment.
But I'm going to stick on that thread with you there. We are sitting in a world where we're competing for talent. And so we've talked about attracting talent with real mission problems. We have external folks like Jim, like Deloitte, who's sponsoring this panel as well. But how do you balance what should you send external and what do we need to build in-house as a capability? So
I look for tools that are providing value in industry broadly in the data science community now. So what I'm trying to fight is the friction that I mentioned earlier. Because if we have a compelling mission set, so we have found talent that's willing to operate at a much lower cost because they're problem junkies. Right. So things that make query more responsive, data more accessible, ETL pipelines more robust, we're highly interested in, because right now the use cases are not well defined. But where we have an environment where we can iterate with the customer, and the intelligence professional starts to learn how they can employ us, now we're moving towards software requirements that we can send out to the best in the world to give us something better than we can imagine at this point. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I'm going to kick it over to Michael here, because I think we're all spot on. There are tons of very talented data scientists out there, or even data analysts that are looking for really fantastic problems. I always lovingly like to say they're tired of working on something like a Snapchat, right? But I don't think attracting the talent's the hard part. It's keeping the talent is where the rubber really meets the road, and something that I know we struggle with. So Michael, what is the talent, what talent are we most in need of, and how do we keep those professionals, train those professionals, or maybe build some up from the ground if we can't actually retain ones from the outside?
Absolutely, Megan. The retention is absolutely the killer for both the military and the government civilians, which is why we tend to hire out. On the military, it's a little bit easier, right? We can keep them in by retention bonuses, and we can keep them in by active duty service commitments. The one thing that the Air Force is very popular or fond of is we're going to educate you and then make you stay longer because we gave you a master's or a PhD. So that works, as well as on our side, we are, apart from the pilots and the special operators, the ops research analysts and the data scientists are the only other career fields that get bonuses. So we're keeping them in that way. But money is not why they entered the Air Force, and we realize that. So it is, as we've been talking, the problems that they have to have really that juicy, exciting problem that they can get their minds on. On the civilian side, it's an entirely different piece, right? Because we can't hold them in by active duty service commitments. We have to bring them in early. So using the programs like SMART, which is, a great recruiting method of getting people out of college directly in with their skills, because we're bringing them in as an intern and having them pay back and hopefully get the hook into them. But it's hard to keep people. It really is. Upskilling has been the best thing that we can do right now, is taking those people that are already committed to both a civilian lifestyle or a military lifestyle, and we upskill them. We make sure that they have access to the tools and training so we can keep them keep innovative and keep them interested in the problems that we're working with.
Yeah, and what role does retention play in, the reason that data cleaning and structuring our data is so important?
Massively, right? So you understand your data like anything else, and that's one of the bigger issues when you do bring in that consulting group, is they may be there for 6 months to a year just to understand where the data is coming from. Then they can finally get active into it. So to actually have someone that is understanding what the feeds are, understanding the various interesting nuances with each of the data, keeping them interested and involved is highly important to the retention and the understanding of how you move from being simply diagnostic to being able to be predictive and prescriptive with what you're dealing with.
But it also makes me think, in where we're trying to attract and keep talent, we've seen some classic examples in the private sector where if we don't have diversity in our data cleansing and our data analysis and data science, we end up with, atrocious scenarios of racist chat bots and things like that. And we need that in the military as well. So, how do we also make sure that that we have diversity in our data science field in the military?
We're fighting that as every day. And unfortunately, if you look on the panel, we have a bunch of light-skinned white guys. So we're not necessarily hitting that mark perfectly. But I think it happens over time. And we're also very aware of it. One of the great stories that I've grew up with as an ops research analyst was you would have all of the aircraft come back in World War II, and the initial instinct is patch the holes, right? Well, patching the holes doesn't fix the problem, because obviously it was the aircraft that were hit where they they were hit somewhere else if they didn't come back. So you have the survivor bias. And we have to be aware of all of our biases, whether it's a survivor bias or something else. If we're aware of them, I think we can start to make sure that we're looking for them, even though diversity may not be the easy way. Obviously, if we can get a more diverse culture and a more diverse analysts into the field, that is the easy, quick solution. But to maintain them and keep them, it's hard. If anyone else on the panel, if they have a way of making sure that we can keep that diversity, I'd love to hear it.
And Jim, I was actually going to kick it over to you for a kind of a private sector view on exactly this problem we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I'll give, my perspective on the retention thing here on a panel with, 3 uniformed servicemen and myself who's never served. This is what I want to do. It's what I wanted to do my entire life. And when it became time to make that decision, do I do this in government service or do it in the private sector? It's a very hard conversation of, can I do this? Can I, if I'm running a company in the private sector and I need computers, well, I go and buy them, right? If I need to bring on a new data scientist, well, I post a job offering, and if the right person walks in the door that day, I hire her, and you do this and you have this discussion as, can I do this, in government service? And, very candidly, the answer is no, 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 no. And, so I think the one word answer I would give it as far as retention goes is empowerment. We need to have a hard look at our culture, and we need to have a hard look at understanding, how it is that we can have people feel very empowered. Mission is obviously number one there, but it's not sufficient, right? And if you're saying, hey, the mission requires me to sit down at my computer and hand jam stuff into Excel spreadsheets, most people will say, got it. They'll do it. They'll do it for 6 months. They'll do it for a year. They'll do it for 4 years. but they will have that one eye out the door because they know that they're not self-actualizing to the extent possible. And I think that is kind of the other half of the solution, right? We need to figure out ways of, I use the word democratizing, but really it's empowerment. I think we need to figure out ways for people who are working inside in government service, whether that's civilian or military, to feel like they are actually kind of maxed out in terms of their ability to apply their skill sets to the problem, and that's a challenge.
And I think it's really important, not just for the individuals like leveraging and doing the work, but also for the tech companies that are bringing solutions in, who have a lot of value that they can bring because they've learned some of the innovation going on in the private sector. How do we also change that culture with the tech companies so that we're getting the best out of the tech, especially I know we have a large audience of tech companies and VCs on the line today. And anyone's welcome to jump in on that one.
If I could opine briefly, I'd say one word is listen, right? You've got cool tech, great. There's probably a reason why it hasn't been adopted, and it's not just because nobody knows what it is. It's unlikely, that the specific customer problem you think you're solving is exactly the problem that someone on the inside is facing. So, my short version of advice would be, listen, ask questions. You're going to find a lot of people who are very happy to have those discussions with you. And if you come to it, not with what slide in my deck does this align with, and when can I fast forward to that slide to show them that we can do it, but a very honest, candid, hey, I genuinely don't know your problems, and I genuinely don't know if we can help until we walk down this path together. I think you're going to find that second, that third, that fourth conversation are not just easier, but also much more meaningful and impactful.
Absolutely. So I think that's spot on. And, we've talked about recruiting the talent, retaining the talent, and listening and leveraging tools. And Vito, I would love to hear, I know Army Futures leadership has been thinking a lot about this. I think you actually have some pretty big announcement for us today around how you all are thinking about this and what you're going to do about it. So over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Megan, and appreciate that intro. So for the past year, Futures Command has been thinking about essentially everything that we've danced around during this panel, and we see digital transformation and operationalizing data science as essentially a critical mass of four key issues, and it's technology, which we kind of talked about at the beginning, is largely the easiest part. Data, talent management, and of course culture. And so, coming on the heels of General Murray's earlier conversation with Andy Jassy of Amazon Web Services this morning, it is my honor to announce during this forum that Army Futures Command is going to be standing up the Army's first soldier-led software factory here in Austin, Texas, in the coming year. We are truly excited to be able to be the command that sort of ushers this in on behalf of the rest of the Army. This is by no means something that only Army Futures Command is doing. We're just facilitating this on behalf of the entire regular Army. We've got a couple lines of effort that, of course, we've thought about as we look to bring this plan to fruition. Number one, it's largely about raising the level of digital proficiency across the Army team for both soldiers and civilians. Number two, it's about solving Army problems, existing Army problems, in an agile way. And then, of course, number three, it's about harnessing the innovative spirit of the national and local Austin ecosystem to incorporate that into some of the Army's decision-making and processes that we kind of alluded to earlier. So thank you for allowing me to make that announcement here during this panel, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really excited to see that. We know there's been a lot of success of software factories across the DoD. So really excited to see Army taking this on. We have a mix of, civilian and military and tech and the systems integrators and VCs who are listening to your announcement and probably saying, I can help, I can get involved. What should they do?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think depending on who you are, if there's soldiers, service members, or Department of the Army civilians out there who are interested in participating, please contact your local human resource manager, your branch manager, or direct message Army Futures Command on any of our social media outlets. We're on all of them. For the tech companies out there, again, reach out through the AFC Public Affairs Office, and continue to participate in forums and venues like this. I guarantee you can find a bunch of Army Futures Command personnel here, happy to have lengthy conversations about this initiative and others. I should add that this initiative is just part of a suite of workforce development programs that Army Futures Command is ushering in this year.
That's fantastic. And I will give a shameless plug. Decode's running a DevOps accelerator coming up, so fit right in. Look forward to collaborating on it. So now we're going to turn over. We're going to take some questions from the audience here. We have one starting out, kind of going back to some of our previous conversation. Is it possible to take individuals that have entered through something like the SMART program and allow them to work on civilian problems as a means of retention, skill improvement, and readiness? Anyone? Yep, go ahead. Yeah.
Great. So the benefit is I actually do exactly that on the Air Force side. Is we have SMART interns that work in Air Force A9, and we do use them to focus on the talent management, which is wonderful, right? Because there's nothing like analysts looking at analyst problems about analysts. So we can cycle through that, which is fun. We're able to do things such as we take the training reports that everyone gets at their master's degree, and we had someone go through it and look for data keywords to better understand what actually our force can do. Because 10 years ago, they may have done something that was genetic algorithms and may have been neural networks, which today we would call artificial intelligence, right? So we're able to go through those records and find that information. So I think we are kind of leading the way by taking these interns and giving them an opportunity. Now, again, it's a little bit in that human relation side. So they really want to figure out the best new aircraft or next new bomber for the aircraft, for the Air Force or Space Force, but yet we're asking them to look at talent management. So it's not necessarily their first desire, but I think they start to see how we can use the tools and actually how it impacts problems very quickly and makes decisions go faster.
Sure. Vito or Matt, anything to add?
Yeah, so we've started to work with some interns. Actually, COVID has helped quite a bit. It's forced us to start thinking about doing things on the unclass internet. But really, we'd like to move in a way where we could expose what we can of our mission set to interns early, and then identify where we want to invest in starting to work on clearances, very similar to how the intelligence community identifies internships at the junior or senior year to then bring on board as civilians.
Sure. So we're going to keep taking questions from the audience. So if you have any questions, you have a great forum here and a really unique opportunity to ask some amazing folks here. The next question that we have coming in from the audience is really discussing how we've always been a believer in the military and training folks in their functional specialties, but this field changes constantly. How are we going to balance making sure we get the training time and keep current when we know that we're also very busy? Matt, I think I saw your hand go up. Yep, go ahead.
I think one of the convenient things about this field is that you don't necessarily have to decouple training from mission. So where we have teams that have folks like from Jim's background rotating through. So I've got some data scientists that 365 days a year, all they think about is special operations. But they work on a computational ecosystem that does not keep pace with industry, right? So when Jim's folks rotate through, the two work together well, and it is training for my people to team with them.
Yeah, great. Michael or Vito, I saw some head nods.
Well, I will add to it what the Air Force and Space Force is doing. So we've actually are teaming with industry on this one because it's absolutely impossible for us to keep AFIT and the education side up to date with the training piece. So we're working with Coursera and DataCamp, and are actually going to each individual position and saying, what are those competencies that position will need? And before someone gets an assignment there, they're now going to have access to a certain badging criteria so they can work through DataCamp or Coursera so that they are prepared before they get there. as we all know, I mean, I got my PhD 13 years ago, and that was in Java and C++, and now everything is on Python. So you got to upskill somehow in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. Vito, how about yourself?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with the previous two comments. I guess I would just add that it just takes investment. I agree with Matt that you don't have to decouple the two; they're not mutually exclusive. But again, going back to your earlier question about senior leader involvement, and it just takes senior leaders to underwrite, the ability to put resources towards keeping up with academia and private industry to make sure that we keep reinvesting in this capability.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like to think of it, we have to stay competitive just the same way that the private sector does. It's just we have to stay competitive for different reasons. So Jim, over to you on how does the private sector stay competitive by, what do you do to train individuals and make sure they're on top of the latest with data science?
Yeah, I mean, I look at this very similar to the way Matt does. And it actually, again, in my mind, ties back to the question we talked a little bit earlier about retention, right? If you can offer people a very interesting, technically compelling how and a mission or meaningful why in the work they're doing, great things are going to happen. And so, I think ultimately, from my perspective, in the private sector, that's really the challenge is that if we can craft what we're doing so that we can tell people that, hey, there's a why that we're doing this that matters, and the how that we're going to do it is going to advance your skills in a technical way, then we've checked the boxes that we need to, right? It's it doesn't, from my perspective, it doesn't have to be, hey, and I say this as a person who, like I think some of the other folks on the panel checked the box for the PhD a long time ago, and then kind of walked away from it a little bit in their personal and professional growth. It doesn't necessarily have to be. I've learned more in doing than I did in learning, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I think that the problems that we're facing in this space, in this arena together, are sufficiently challenging and do require enough kind of technical muscle behind it that you can put those pieces together in that kind of on-the-job environment.
All right, I'm going to do a lightning round, so everyone will answer in one sentence. First one, what keeps you up at night when it comes to data science and human capital? Let's go, Vito.
Yep, the ability of the Army to reform its human capital systems to meet the need.
All right, Matt.
How can we get our senior leaders to learn how much we gain by getting a usable, broadly enabled platform?
All right, Michael.
I'll go with the other side of it, and that'll be the tools, making sure people have the access to the tools that they need, so they're not spending time getting the tools when their problem is asked.
Okay, and Jim.
And for completeness, I'll list the last one, access to the right data, making sure that data from all the different collections can come to one place and be analyzed in an actionable time frame.
All right, my next lightning round question. I know these are fun. If there was one piece of advice that you would give a senior leader in the DoD on how to move forward effectively with this, one sentence, what would it be? We'll do the same order.
Yeah, commit to the investment.
I like that one.
Limit work in progress.
Trust your advisors.
There we go. And Jim.
Measure outputs, not inputs.
All right, all really fantastic advice. And I know there was a lot here. We covered a lot of topics that I think we could probably spend over an hour on just in themselves. Any parting words from you all that you want to make sure everyone that's in the audience today really heard and really came through? I know we just had one piece of advice, but one piece of advice for anybody else in the audience that has a role in helping the DoD move forward. All right, Vito, we'll start with you.
Yep. On behalf of Army Futures Command, we're here. Our doors are open. We're very much receptive to forward-thinking concepts. Please engage with us across the board.
All right, go ahead.
I'll just say, keep chasing it. I've watched the special operations community mature quite a bit over the last year. When I look at the things coming out of Army Futures Command, we're heading in the same direction. So I think the barrier to entry in DoD is going down as we start trying to solve real problems.
And I agree with the last two as well, and simply want to add that it may be a change in perspective, that data scientists may soon become algorithmic warfighters. And as we move forward with that, that's going to be how we will be attacking and approaching problems.
And the last thing I'd add on top of all that is that I think the maturity is there in DoD to see real impact. The problems are there, so just get proximity, get close to the problem set, and I think you'll be empowered to do some stuff.
That's great. What a great way to end that panel. I want to thank each and every one of you for all your fantastic insight. Congratulations again to Army Futures on the announcement of the software factory. That's really exciting. I know how much hard work went into that. So huge congratulations. And thank you again, everybody, and look forward to seeing you all out in the mission and making things happen.